One of the most important aspects of filmmaking is narrative, which is the way something is told in both fictional and non-fictional texts. There are plenty of films throughout history that tell their stories very well. Star Wars, The Lord of the Rings, Jurassic Park. But when we're talking about narrative theory, we're talking about similar models of storytelling that we can see across multiple films. Narrative theory is the idea that films follow certain storytelling patterns and themes. One such theory comes from Vladimir Prop, a Russian critic and literary theorist who broke down stories into 31 narrative units. Within these units you can find the key character roles he touches upon, which are the hero, the villain, the donor who helps the hero, the dispatcher who sends the hero on his way, the one who helps the hero, the princess, the father of the princess. All of these are character roles that Vladimir Prop touched upon, and they can be found within Star Wars: A New Hope. The important thing to keep in mind though is that the narrative theory isn't about finding one model to fit all films, but rather about discovering and understanding the similarities in narrative approach across a number of films. Films with a more traditional approach, such as Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, have characters that would fit into Prop's character roles, whereas films like Taxi Driver and Nightcrawler would not. Another model would be the equilibrium theory suggested by Savat and Todorov. The theory suggests that stories begin in a state of equilibrium, showing us the normal state of affairs of our characters and the world around them, as we see in the first 20 or so minutes of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. This is followed by the disruption or the disequilibrium, which would be Peter Parker gaining his powers and creating a foe in Norman Osborn. As Peter defeats Norman, things return back to a state of equilibrium and normality, despite the changes central characters may have gone through. The same model can be applied to Die Hard: equilibrium, disequilibrium, and new equilibrium. The last theory I want to touch upon is that of Claude Levi-Strauss. Claude was a social anthropologist who studies how films unconsciously reflect the values, beliefs, and myths of a culture expressed in binary opposition. This can be seen in The Homesteaders in 1953, with Mace Corbin and Clyde Moss in the role of the homesteaders, and the binary opposition being the Native Americans. Other conflicts found within this theory are that of domestic against the savage and the weak against the strong. Binary opposition is used in the conflict all across film. It can be simplified down to just good against bad, heroes against villains, and light against dark. It's a hard thing to really pinpoint just why so many films can fall into any of these three narrative theories, but I'd probably pull it down to it being just the norm of storytelling. Again, not all feature films employ these methods, but a majority do use at least one of them, because it's become the standard for storytelling. So many writers and storytellers have grown up watching films that employ these methods that when it's their turn to write the stories, they employ them as well. But it's also a comfortable standard. Humans and audiences are very wary of change in their entertainment. Just look at the box office of the last few years. The movies that make the most money are the ones that are very similar from a character perspective, to a narrative structure, to the themes the film explores. So when audiences see similar standards of storytelling, normality being disrupted before returning to a new state of normality, or familiar character roles, it's more comfortable. And whether that's a good or bad thing, well, that's up to you.